So, in regards to the big three television networks, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and Disney, they've definitely had their moments of making shows that are good and making shows that are bad. Even during the times before people screamed out the words, "This network started going downhill after this specific date," studios are bound to make mistakes. We all know that. If this introduction is not enough to write home the point. So, not only are studios bound to make mistakes once in a while, even during their golden years, but one studio is not exclusive to having specific issues. Nickelodeon is a studio that has a history of mistreating shows that aren't on par with SpongeBob. But so is Disney. If what they did to Nightmare Ned, Teacher's Pet, Dave the Barbarian, The Buzz on Maggie, and Haley's On It are anything to go by. And more specifically, what I'm talking about today is Cartoon Network, and the topic of today's subject, Villainous. Now, in regards to Cartoon Network's history of mistreating shows, I'd say that this began during the time when Johnny Bravo got canceled briefly after season 1, and they didn't bring Van Partible back for season 2, and really began around Mike Lou and Og and Sheep in the Big City. And a lot of mistreatment happened from there, from canceling shows over toys like Courage the Cowardly Dog or Camp Lazlo, to giving shows tax write-offs like Megas XLR or Symbionic Titan, to generally mishandling time slots, which mess with the show's ratings, like Hi Hi Puffy Amiyumi and OKKO. But in regards to Villainous, it's one of those shows that was generally mistreated, but not for the reasons that you might think. You see, the first time that I've heard about anything about Villainous was back in 2016 or 17, when it was a pilot at first. And in all honesty, the show sounded interesting, I guess, but Cartoon Network's general treatment of the show seems to have generally restricted the potential that it could have had. In all honesty, I haven't seen a series that for years went through a ton of delays and struggles before being turned into a full-fledged show that ended up being short-lived anyway since Making Fiends. But even then, Making Fiends was able to make it to the 6-episode mark, which was the same amount of episodes that the first seasons of Ren and Stimpy and Chalk Zone had. Villainous, to this very day, not counting the shorts, only has 6 episodes. 3 if you count the full half hours. And if you ask, no, I don't know why Cartoon Network does this now. And as of right now, this is the second shortest of the Cartoon Network shows, ahead of Long Live the Royals' 2 half hours worth of episodes. For years, Cartoon Network had been teasing the audience about this show's official release, with things like the Easter egg in the crossover Nexus episode of OKKO, and a crossover episode in Victor and Valentino. And then when the show was finally released in English in 2023, we finally got to see what the show got. And as a result, this is where I'm here right now, ignoring all the mistreatment that this show is given. The show is alright. The best way to sum up this show in a way where I can summarize it, so that I won't give myself a headache while writing this script, this show basically walks so that Vivzy Pop's HB can run. Like that show, the basic premise of this show is that this guy in a top hat and tuxedo, named Black Hat, sends 2 characters, a guy with the lunch bag on his head named Dr. Flug, and a woman with long hair named Dementia, out on missions to the request of any client that Black Hat meets up with. Except, whereas in HB, the show takes place in Heck, and the characters that are tasked with the jobs of taking care of anyone that Blitz wants Moxie, Billy, and Luna to take care of in the human world are either imps or hounds, this show is basically more in line with the show like Evil Con Carne, where the characters are just regular villains, some being more evil than the others, although Evil Con Carne tries to be lighthearted, given that it is a show that is generally aimed towards a much younger demographic, if you take out the sequences where they do more adult jokes, but that's really besides the point. Heck, this show even makes a joke about this at the end of one of the episodes. Villainous tries to be more serious. I mean, at the end of the first episode, it's implied that Black Hat gives them an extremely harsh punishment if they do so much as a mediocre job on missions. And Black Hat was also pressuring Dr. Flug to wrestle against Dementia while she was possessed in episode 3. Needless to say, Hector Con Carne is definitely not going to rule the world with this guy being around anytime soon. But getting into the issues that I have with Villainous, it's not so much what the show itself does with itself that has the issues that it's got now, but rather the treatment of the show that was given noticeably affect the show in so many ways. Many of the other shows that I've reviewed so far in this series, even those that were admittedly mistreated, were issues that were caused in the shows themselves, but for Villainous, the show gives off the impression that it wanted to do more with itself, and it was hoping that it would end up getting more seasons to flesh itself out, but they were stuck with 6 episodes instead. But just like what I pointed out with Middle School Moguls and Long Live the Royals, the show does not give off that impression that it was supposed to be a miniseries in the slightest, and that it wanted to be a full-fledged show itself, but executive meddling ended up tampering with the show as a result. The show also feels extremely disappointing in regards to the crossover aspect. Now, I am someone who does have a thing for crossovers. It's very cool to see what it would be like to see characters from different shows or properties interacting with each other, and you know, I was originally thinking that maybe this is what Villainous would be like, because a few years ago, this show got a crossover with Victor and Valentino, which was a lot of fun, that basically had Dr. Flug and Dementia traveling to that show's world, and to me, this does seem like a fun concept for a show like this. Because in essence, Cartoon Network shows have always had this crossover aspect to it, even at the end of the Cartoon era with Cartoon Network Invaded. So this does seem like an interesting idea for a series, having the characters go into other Cartoon Network shows, definitely not the shows that are slice of life of course, but the ones that are more fantastical would have been nice to see. But what we got instead is a case where it wants to have its cake and eat it too, where the show doesn't really commit to the crossover aspect that the Victor and Valentino episode set up. But rather, the show just kind of threw the crossover aspect in haphazardly, where the Cartoon Network characters would often show up at random points in the episodes, when it's very much implied that all of them are meant to live in their own universes, and they're often just there for background Easter eggs at most. Not even as some sort of joke, or the show acknowledging that a character from another completely different show is there. Going back to OKKO, what makes that show work in regards to its references is that the show used those characters to either make jokes based on them, or they just flat out do a crossover with them. Same thing applies to Johnny Bravo, as well as Billy and Mandy. But putting all that aside, as I stated before, I find this show to be just decent. It's probably like a 6 out of 10, primarily because of the fact that buried underneath the wasted potential that this show had, there are a ton of things that I do like about this show, like the characters, for example. Dementia is a very fun character, and the voice actress was obviously having a ton of fun with the role, and Black Hat is giving me some vibes of Alistair from Has-Been Hotel, but he's a lot more menacing in how he approaches things. But there are a lot of things that this show does that, due to executive meddling, really affected the show in the long run. But at the exact same time, I can't help but feel absolutely sorry for this show and what it had to go through and what it got in the end. Maybe the shorts are better than the show itself, but I don't know if they are, because unlike Making Fiends, I didn't watch any of the shorts before jumping into this show, but given that the shorts are pretty hard to find, and most if not all of them are not even in English, it's safe to say that the shorts don't really affect the show all that much. But when looking at some of them and what they did with the Cartoon Network characters, it's safe to say that maybe there was a reason why Cartoon Network didn't air these shorts or the show in the first place.
Everything